Hello, third graders at Northside. This is your mentor sentence video for the week. We're going to go over some skills with it and a part of speech with the book, just like we did last week. Okay? Our mentor sentence book this week is called Enemy Pie. Okay? I'm going to share the screen with you to go over the sentence that you will see this week. Okay, let's look at it together. Dad dished up 3 plates side by side with big pieces of pie and giant scoops of ice cream. Okay, why don't you read it with me at home? Ready? Dad dished up 3 plates side by side with big pieces of pie and giant scoops of ice cream. Okay, so as we read the book, I want you to give me a thumbs up when we come to this sentence, okay? All right, so let's enjoy the book and then we'll go over some skills later, okay? This is Enemy Pie by Derek Munson, illustrated by Tara Callahan King. This is also an AR test. If you want to write this down really quickly, the quiz number is 45222. Okay, we encourage you to take an AR test on this book. Enemy Pie. It should have been a perfect summer. My dad helped me build a treehouse in our backyard. My sister was at camp for 3 whole weeks, and I was on the best baseball team in town. It should have been a perfect summer, but it wasn't. It was all good until Jeremy Ross moved into the neighborhood right next door to my best friend Stanley. I did not like Jeremy Ross. He laughed at me when he struck me out in a baseball game. He had a party on his trampoline and I wasn't invited, but my best friend Stanley was. Jeremy Ross was the one and only person on my enemy list. I never even had an enemy list until he moved into the neighborhood. But as soon as he came along, I needed one. I hung it up in my treehouse where Jeremy Ross was not allowed to go. Dad understood stuff like enemies. He told me that when he was my age, he had enemies too. But he knew of a way to get rid of them. I asked him how to tell me how. Tell you how? I'll show you how, he said. He pulled a really old recipe book off the kitchen shelf. Inside, there was a worn-out scrap of paper with faded writing. Dad held it up and squinted at it. Enemy pie, he said. Satisfied? You may be wondering what exactly is in enemy pie. I was wondering too. But Dad said the recipe was so secret, he couldn't even tell me. I decided it must be magic. I begged him to tell me something, anything. I will tell you this, he said. Enemy pie is the fastest known way to get rid of enemies. Now, of course, this got my mind working. What kinds of things, disgusting things, would I put into a pie for an enemy? I brought Dad some weeds from the garden, but he just shook his head. I brought him earthworms and rocks, but he didn't think he'd need those. I gave him the gum I've been chewing on all morning. He gave it right back to me. I went out to play alone. I shot baskets until the ball got stuck on the roof. I threw a boomerang that never came back to me, and all the while, I listened to the sounds of my dad chopping and stirring and blending the ingredients of enemy pie. This could be a great summer after all. Enemy pie was going to be awful. I tried to imagine how horrible it must smell, or worse yet, what it would look like. But when I was in the backyard looking for ladybugs, I smelled something really, really, really good. As far as I could tell, it was something coming from our kitchen. I was a bit confused. Should enemy pie smell good? Think about it. If you're going to make a pie for your enemy, you would put gross and nasty stuff in it, right? Because you would not want your enemy to enjoy it. But he is smelling something good from the kitchen. Make a prediction. What do you think is going to happen? I went in to ask Dad what was wrong. Enemy pie shouldn't smell this good, but Dad was smart. If enemy pie smelled bad, your enemy would never eat it, he said. I could tell he'd made enemy pie before. The buzzer rang and Dad put on the oven mitts and pulled the pie out of the oven. It looked like plain old pie. It looked good enough to eat. I was catching on. Okay, so let's confirm our prediction. That makes sense. It needs to taste good or they wouldn't eat it. But still, I wasn't really sure how this enemy pie worked. What exactly did it do to enemies? Maybe it made their hair fall out or their breath stinky. Maybe it made bullies cry. I asked Dad, but he was no help. He wouldn't tell me a thing. But while the pie cooled, he filled me in on my job. So he has a job he has to do concerning enemy pie. He talked quietly. There is one part of enemy pie that I can't do. In order for it to work, you need to spend a day with your enemy. Even worse, you have to be nice to him. It's not easy, but that's the only way that enemy pie can work. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Of course I was. It sounded horrible. It was scary, but it was worth a try. All I had to do was spend one day with Jeremy Ross. Then he'd be out of my hair for the rest of my life. I rode my bike to his house and knocked on the door. So he has a job to do. He has to spend a whole day with his enemy, or it won't work. Let's see what happens. When Jeremy opened the door, he seemed surprised. He stood on the other side of the screen door and looked at me, waiting for me to say something. I was nervous. Can you play? I asked. He looked confused. I'll go ask my mom, he said. He came back with his shoes in his hand. His mom walked around the corner to say hello. You boys stay out of trouble, she said, smiling. We rode bikes for a while and played on the trampoline. Then we made some water balloons and threw them at the neighbor girls, but we missed. Jeremy's mom made us lunch. After lunch, we went over to my house. You know, it was strange, but I was kind of having fun with my enemy. He almost seemed nice. But of course, I couldn't tell Dad that since he had worked so hard to make this enemy pie. Jeremy Ross liked my basketball hoop. He said he wished he had a basketball hoop, but they didn't have room for one. I let him win a game, just to be nice. Jeremy Ross knew how to throw a boomerang. He threw it and it came right back to him. I threw it and it went over my house and into the backyard. When we climbed over the fence to find it, the first thing Jeremy noticed was my tree house. Ooh, now let's stop right here. Remember the note that he posted in his tree house at the beginning? What was on it? Remember, it was his enemy list, and whose name was on it? Jeremy's name. And now Jeremy wants to go to his tree house. Uh-oh, let's see what's going to happen. My tree house was my tree house. I was the boss. If my sister wanted in, I didn't have to let her. If my dad wanted in, I didn't have to let him. And if Jeremy wanted in, can we go in it? He asked. I knew he was going to ask me that, but he was the top person, the only person on my enemy list, and enemies aren't allowed in my treehouse. But he did teach me how to throw a boomerang, and he did have me over for lunch, and he did let me play on his trampoline. He wasn't being a very good enemy. Okay, I said, but hold on. Why do you think he tells Jeremy to hold on? You guessed it. He's going to take the list down, isn't he? What's happening with these boys? Do you think they're becoming friends? I climbed up ahead of him and tore the enemy list off the wall. I had a checkerboard and some cards in the treehouse, and we played games until my dad called us down for dinner. We pretended we didn't hear him, and when he came out to get us, we tried to hide from him. But somehow, he found us. So did they have fun in the treehouse together? Sure, just like they've been having fun all day long. Dad made us macaroni and cheese for dinner, my favorite. It was Jeremy's favorite too. Maybe Jeremy Ross wasn't so bad after all. I was beginning to think that maybe we should just forget about the enemy pie. But sure enough, after dinner, Dad brought out the pie. I watched as he cut the pie into 8 thick slices. Dad, I said, it sure is nice having a new friend in the neighborhood. I was trying to get his attention and trying to tell him that Jeremy Ross was no longer my enemy, but Dad only smiled and nodded. I think he thought I was just pretending. Dad dished up 3 plates side by side with big pieces of pie and giant scoops of ice cream. There's your mentor sentence right there. He passed one to me and one to Jeremy. Wow, Jeremy said, looking at the pie. My dad never makes pies like this. It was at this point that I panicked. I didn't want Jeremy to eat enemy pie. He was my friend. I couldn't let him eat it. Jeremy, don't eat it. It's bad pie. I think it's poisonous or something. Jeremy's fork stopped before reaching his mouth. He crumpled his eyebrows and looked at me funny. I felt relieved. I had saved his life. I was a hero. If it's so bad, Jeremy asked, then why has your dad already eaten half of it? I turned to look at my dad. Sure enough, he was eating enemy pie. Good stuff, he mumbled through a mouthful, and that was all he said. I sat there watching them eat enemy pie for a few seconds. Dad was laughing, Jeremy was happily eating, and neither of them was losing any hair. It seemed safe enough, so I took a tiny taste. Enemy pie was delicious. So Dad made a good pie. Can you think about what is going on here? What was Dad's plan the whole time? What happens when you spend time with someone? You find out more about them. And he found out he actually liked Jeremy. Okay, and they became what? They became friends. So Dad's pie was good all along. But remember the job he had to do. He had to spend a whole day with his enemy. And then they learned that they could become friends. After dessert, Jeremy rode his bike home, but not before inviting me over to play on his trampoline in the morning. He said he'd teach me how to flip. As for enemy pie, I still don't know how to make it. I still wonder if enemies really do hate it, or if their hair falls out, or their breath turns bad. But I don't know if I'll ever get an answer because I just lost my best enemy. How about that? So they're not enemies, they are friends. Okay, I'm going to share my screen with you again to go over some skills from the book. A couple of the skills we went over last week. Let me see. Thank you for being patient with me as I get that up. So let's look at our lesson for the day. Here's your mentor sentence again from Enemy Pie. Dad dished up 3 plates side by side with big pieces of pie and giant scoops of ice cream. Remember last week we went over these. Remember that a complete sentence tells a complete thought and has a subject and predicate, okay? And a complete sentence always has 2 parts, a subject and a predicate. So as you see here in this sentence, Dad is your subject. It tells who or what your sentence is about, okay? And this is something that can help you remember subject. The subject can be found when you look just for a noun. Okay, so the noun here is dad. And so we are looking for the who or what when we're looking for the subject. The predicate, though, tells what happened. It's the verb in the rest of the sentence. The verb here is dished. It's the action word. And remember, sometimes it's not the action word. It's like is, are, was, can take the place of an action word, but many times it is an action word. So the predicate starts with that verb, and then it's the rest of the sentence if you're talking about the complete predicate, okay? And here's something to help you remember that. The predicate starts with a verb, and it can be one or more words, okay? Just remember that. So that is a review from last week, and you'll have practice on that today. Now let's move on down to some new skills. Types of sentences. Last year, you learned these in second grade, but it's been a while, so we're going to go over them again. Just like there are two parts to a sentence, there are 4 types of ways that you can express yourself when you are writing a sentence, okay? So yes, you've learned that, most sentences end with a period, but not all sentences end with a period because you express yourself differently, okay? So we have to learn those 4 different end marks and those 4 types of sentences as well. So the first type is a declarative sentence. A declarative sentence makes a statement. It ends with a period, okay? That's what I tell my kids. It ends with a period, and we make a period in the air. It just tells something. The second type is interrogative. An interrogative sentence asks a question. It ends with a question mark. Then we go to imperative. An imperative sentence gives a command, meaning it's bossy, bossy, bossy. It tells someone to do something. It also ends with a period like a declarative sentence, okay? And then you have exclamatory. Exclamatory shows excitement. You're really excited when you say it, and it ends with an exclamation mark, okay? Now, sometimes imperatives can be exclamatory. For example, if I said, wow, what a great show, that's exclamatory. But I could give somebody a command if I'm trying to keep them safe. For example, watch out for that car. That's still an imperative sentence because you're telling someone to watch out for that car, but you would put an exclamation mark because you're showing excitement. Okay, does that make sense? Good deal. So this mentor sentence is a declarative sentence. It is just telling us something that Dad did. Okay, but there's a way that we could actually change it up to make different kinds of sentences. For example, I could have said, what is your dad's name? That would be interrogative. I could say, please give me 2 scoops, Dad. That would be imperative. I could say, wow, Dad, you have a huge ice cream cone. And that would be exclamatory, okay? Do you see how that works? So this week, we're just learning what a declarative sentence is with the mentor sentence example, but we're also learning the rest, okay? And the part of speech to know that we are reviewing is actually the same one from last week. Adjectives. These are words that describe nouns. The adjectives from this sentence are 3, big, and giant. 3 describes the number of plates there were. Big describes the size of the pieces of pie, and giant describes the sizes of the scoops. So that is why I put those words in green up here. 3, big, and giant. Those are adjectives. And that is a part of speech you can know today. Okay? So, there you have it. That is the end of our lesson, and I hope this was helpful to you. See you next week.